Okay, Alan, many thanks for allowing the Irish Grassland Association onto your farm for this virtual open day. And maybe you might give us an outline of the farm, the system, maybe the history of the farm.
Yeah, well, first of all, you're so very welcome here to my valley. We're on the border between Meath and Kildare. The fence over there divides between Meath and Kildare. The farm is a fragmented farm. I've 3 different divisions. Here where we are now is an out farm. It's 50 acres here. At home, the home block is where the shed and my house is and all that. And then I have another block of land up 2 miles away. It leaves it very more difficult to manage when you have, compared to having all the land together. But we work with it, and we work with it in that. Its soil type would vary between light and heavy. You have sandy loam, you have heavy clay, and then you'd have black soil as well. So we've different soils to work with, but we work with it. It's ideal for dry stock once you manage it right, because different times it can be an advantage with a soil type that retains moisture, and then it can be an advantage to having the dry land as well. So you just work with what you've got and get the best resources of what you got.
So Alan, you mentioned that it's a beef farm. What beef system do you run on the farm?
I buy weanings in October, and I keep buying them till about mid-November, and I keep them for about till they're beef. And I have them in the shed for 3 days after bringing them in. I insist that they come from the mart as soon as they're bought and as soon as I can get them home. And they go into a straw bedded shed then for about 3 days. And I just sprinkle a few nuts so that they walk in and they get used to the nuts in the shed that night. And the clean water, a big bed of straw. And the next day then I have to handle them very gently because they're nervous and that. And I go in and just get them used to me with a few nuts in the trucks then. Then I let them out after 3 days out into a sheltered paddock, which is well fenced then. And the same story, I walk through them, I get them used to me. And once I get them used to me and settled down, after 3 days out in that sheltered paddock, to go on down further. It's important that they're never, a batch comes in and goes on and stays in that batch for about 2 or 3 weeks, so that no mixing of, roughly I buy a batch every week, 15 to 20 weanings, and I just keep them separated for that length of time, with an awful lot of vigilance then watching them. And then once you get over 3 weeks then, and as they're coming in batches then, after about a month you can start putting them together, because they're over the vital period of, they're very vulnerable. They're after coming off a cow, the stress of going to a mart. That's why we have to minimise the amount of stress to have when they come into my farm. And then the big thing about that system then is they get so used to you then that you can do what you like for the length of time you have them to their beef. You can, very easy to manage then, you know.
And it obviously works because your health your health status is very high in that first a couple of months there. So the protocol you've set up is working very, very well. Just to go back to the beef system, how many weanings do you buy, Alan?
About 120 weanings.
120. And are they, what's the finishing system then? Are they all finished off grass or finished out of the sheds? What's the split there?
Half and half. And I'm trying to produce more of them off grass than in the shed, because it's costing more in the shed. And that's the way the paddock system and the improvement in the quality of grass will help me. It'll mean that I'll have more grass for them outside, more quality grass for them. I want to minimise the amount of time and expense of being in the shed, so I want to get...
And is that the beef system you've always operated, Alan, buying weanings? Is that that's...
Well, it's going back about 10 years, yeah.
Okay, and prior to that, what did you...
Before that, it was well, I went back a long time. I was on calf to beef, and then I used to buy store cattle then in between, but then I got into the system of weaning to beef, yeah. And then you have the weaning coming in at about 300 kgs, and he's just coming off the cow at that stage, and he's only the one movement. It's not like years ago where there used to be dealers in mart. Every weaning that comes in now comes directly from the farm to the mart, and then he's, as quick as he can, he's on my farm, and I'm looking after him from there on. That's vitally important. No matter how much you do with him, it's just to look after him.
That transition onto your farm.
That transition period,
right.
yeah.
And Alan, just do you go to the marts and buy your own stock, or how do you source it?
I have an agent a local agent that's been doing it all, buying my cattle for me all my life. He's a great lad. He's able to judge cattle very well, and he comes in and picks them for the factory, and he does everything for me. But he's a great eye for. Wouldn't be too bad myself, but I leave it to him. It takes the responsibility away then. My whole focus then is looking after the weanlings. I don't have to worry about getting them home from a mart. He does that for me. Yeah.
And what sort of carcass weight do you bring the beef to?
About 410 kilos carcass weight. And then maybe later on grass, them continentals can go a bit heavier then later on, because they have a maturity date to fatten, and then the more growthy ones then might go on to 420, 430 kilos, which would be the weights, yeah.
And over the last number of years, you've obviously been involved in the Grass 10 course. Over the last number of years, you've made significant changes on the farm in relation to the way you manage grass. Could you outline maybe where you started, or where was the starting point, Alan, maybe 3 or 4 years ago?
Well, about 5 years ago, or 6 years ago, I started by just maybe putting the cattle. It used to be a set stocking system I had, where you put 20 cattle here, 20 cattle there, 20. And then I started putting maybe bigger groups together and using the fields, grazing them out, grazing out a field and then just moving them on. But then in the last 3 years, 2 years, last year I started putting in paddocks and splitting the fields into, I wouldn't have big fields in places, and I just split the field, and then you had 2 paddocks, say, and so I got into, now that I have about 42 paddocks around the farm, going from 13 divisions up to 42, and it has left it be a much better quality all the time, because you're grazing it out. Your cattle are thriving much better, because nearly at every stage they have quality grass. Going back to the set stocking time, and you put them out, they've great grass. The next thing, they've too much grass. Next thing, you're going in topping it, you're wasting it. You end up with no quality grass maybe anywhere. Now I have quality grass everywhere, with the result that my cattle are finishing about a month earlier, and that's only in the last year I've noticed this happening, and that's why it's a direct result of what I did last year. And the big thing about it is to try and minimise the cost of setting up the paddock system, because with the way it is with beef farming, you're trying to work on a budget, and you work with what you have. Okay, I did put a main fencing line down along my farm at home, and I tapped into all that. And down here where we are now, it's an isolated farm, so I didn't know what I was going to do. I considered getting ESB down here, but that was costing too much, and then you had a cost every year of that, even though you weren't using it that much. So I ended up buying a solar pump, and a solar pump unit with which takes the water out of the river, and I put in drinkers to facilitate the solar. That I had drinkers all around. Well, I only put in 3, but I can tap into them, big 200-gallon drinkers, and I can then divide up as I want it. Then I put a mains line down along the centre of this farm, which is powered by the battery and the solar pump. There's a backup battery in the unit, and then the solar pump, and it electrifies the whole farm with the electrification I did along the main axis of the farm, and then I can tap into all that then. I did two things. I got the cattle out of the river with fencing off the river, and I was able to, for management purposes then, I was able to tap into the electric wire for management purposes.
So it just shows the difficulty of operating a fragmented farm. You have two different systems really to try and set up.
This was the answer to everything what I did here, and I've been working that for 3 years now, and I've had no problems with it. Minor issues, but I just ring up the chap I bought and he sorts it out. But
so that solar ran system will power your water pump and powers your electrified fences.
Exactly, okay. And it's a powerful whack out of the electric fencer as well. So
and that unit, how big an area does that cover? This is on the out farm where we are now.
It covers 50 acres here.
Okay.
And roughly the fencing then for here cost about 20 euros an acre, and then separate to the solar pump costs about 2,300. The solar pump unit.
So it revolutionised the way you manage grass on the out farm.
It just solved. It was fantastic now.
And Alan, the position with soil fertility, I suppose you were looking at that over the years. What sort of?
Yeah, when we started, first I decided to look at the soil fertility, and we did a analysis and a test on all the land, and we seen our P's and K's, which is the case in a lot of farms, dry stock farms in the country. So I said we'll have to sort this out, and we worked with that where it wanted P's and K's, and lime we're continuously working on that, and we're building it up, which even old pastures, which some of my pastures were never reseeded, the older pastures. The most recently reseeded pastures are about 25 years old. So we worked with what we had, and it's amazing what you can do with old pastures if you get the P's and K's right.
And you're grazing, you're tight grazing and resting the ryegrass. Yeah, you can see the ryegrass coming back.
Yeah, with the strip grazing, then you're stripping it down, cutting, and then the quality grasses are all coming through then, you know, and then you've very little use of your topper as well. I used to so it means that every blade of grass you're growing, you're using.
So you don't no need for putting on the topper at all, Alan. No, that's left back in the shed.
It's above
there.
In the shed now, but anyway, I have it there. But maybe an odd time you have a few thistles or something to top.
And just to go back on the cost, like it's not a big investment. 20 euro an acre for your stakes wire.
Yeah, well,
and
most farms would have existing facilities there, so you have to use whatever resources you have there, and like most farmers would be able to put up the fencing themselves. In areas now I put the contract fencing, which are much more expensive, along the river and all that, but I thought that was a good investment. But you could have the costs on posts and wire by doing it yourself and using maybe not as heavy a posts, and there's ways around everything, you know.
And when your silage is cut, then when you go to graze that, you put temporary divisions in there, Alan. Then
I do,
yeah.
Okay. And that's another thing about the last couple of years, improving the silage quality by cutting at the right time, having it ready to cut, and then the last couple of years my silage has been 74% DMD, and it has cut down on the amount of meal that I use. So I pull the meal off the weanlings in February and have them ready to go out in March. But that's a great, the minute you put the meal out, cost gone. And the same with any forward store cattle you have in the shed, cut them off in February, because the weanlings would be only coming in December, right. Early December, and they're going out in March. So that you're minimising, and I hope to improve on that even in the future, the amount of period they're inside. And the same with the forward store cattle, get them out maybe in end of February if you can, on good grass. And the same story, you couldn't believe there in January we looked at them inside on the 74, said these lads are shining, we don't need any meal here. Cut it out, because you're gaining on, I think, 0.6 of a kilo without any meal. And that's what we want to do. We want to get more weight on the cattle with grass.
And Ali, you mentioned, I think to me there, that you were looking at how much meal you've reduced indoors on with the better quality silage.
This year and last year, I looked at the meal bill for January to the last meal I bought last year and this year, and I reduced it by 40%.
Okay, so from January to turnout, a drop of 40% in meal usage, yeah, phenomenal. And going back to your paddocks, Alan, you've about you said there was about 60 hectares on the farm. So your paddock sizes are around what, a hectare?
A hectare, yeah. An odd one would be just working with a field, might be a bit bigger, but anyway.
And how long do you get out of each paddock? Well, first of all, the groups. You said earlier on that you went from set stocking to larger groups. You had lots of smaller groups. Now we have larger groups.
Yeah, well, if you, down the home farm, which we're going back to now, I would have 53 600 kg bullocks. They're the fattening ones at the moment in that particular group. I'd say that's enough of them big lads to have together. And then you'd have, well, depending on the weather and everything, you group the weanlings in bigger groups if the weather improved. But you'd still have 50 together, or roughly that, you know.
Much easier to make decisions with regard to what paddock to graze when you have less groups, smaller groups. You have less decisions to make.
Yeah, and they get used to you too. Management of them for, well, of course, when they want to get out to the next paddock, they let you know. Yeah. But the other thing is, over the lifetime that you have them on the farm, just give them a shout to bring them in or do anything, you know.
Yeah, they're used to it.
Yeah.
And going back to, we'll say, the paddocks, Alan, is there much extra work? Do you find you have extra work? Is there extra labour involved when you're, running this grazing system with paddocks?
No, not really. It's just be around just to open the electric fences, and it leaves them. You have a bigger group together, and it's easier to see them and all that type of thing than going around different groups and that. I know everything's pointing to positive about it, you know.
Okay, and so the dividends you see from the extra management and the paddocks, your better quality grass, your cattle are finishing up to a month earlier, so you're capturing maybe especially when you're killing off grass, a higher price there. You're not waiting on late in the year.
The younger you can sell them, it's costing you less, and you're getting usually, for my system, the higher prices early in the season. So the sooner you have them gone, the better, you know. And that's happening with the month, killing them a month earlier, and hopefully it's an ongoing process that you can keep improving on that, you know. And it's the same with the cattle that you be fattening in the shed. Even though you might be reducing the number, it's costing a lot less. You say 100 days, finish them at say 4 or 5 kilos, and that's it. It's not a big cost, even the ones you want to, because you have that 74% DMD silage, you know.
And the other dividend in relation to, getting better utilisation of the grass, you were able to drop some rented land and actually you're planning to increase cattle numbers.
Maybe dropping all rented land because I don't need it. I even dropped 20 acres, 22 acres of rented land. I didn't make I said, and I've surplus silage, I've surplus fodder and all that, even, you know.
So there's a big dividend there. 20 acres rent, less rent acre to pay.
For the last couple of years.
Yeah, better, shorter winter housing period. Cattle are finishing a month earlier at grass, and your ryegrasses are increasing. And again, you said all with old pasture.
With old pasture.
When was the last reseeding done here?
25 to 30 years ago, which would have been out there, yeah.
Okay, so it's excellent performance, that you can see a real big dividend there.
Often say, you'd have, a few years ago, you had people here and were saying, just put it to them, should you reseed that? No way, that's fantastic pasture, because you're losing a lot by ploughing up land, in a lot of ways, and then the cost and all that.
Yeah, but there must be a great sense of satisfaction that you're putting so much grass through the cattle. It's all homegrown feed. Yeah. You're getting better performance. There must be a great buzz about running a beef system that way.
Well, the main thing is you get excited now, even at this stage now, bringing the cattle into the second round there, and even though it was a bad growing season, you know that you have enough grass for them there, and it's quality grass they're going into. You'd be getting the maximum amount of gain on them cattle now at this stage,
I suppose the other advantage of the paddocks, when you make a decision, we'll say in the past if you had 13 divisions, you make a decision, it's a relatively big decision, but when you're making a decision to graze or not graze one of 40 paddocks, whether you get it right or wrong, it's not huge. You know, it gives you the confidence to make a decision, and because it's a small decision.
And then I didn't mention, but my son he's working away from the farm, but he's got an interest in doing all the mapping for the paddocks. Only for him now, he did all that, and I have it on paper here. And he's in contact with me. It's as if he's on the farm. He's every other day. Did you move them yet? How many days did you get out of it and everything? And even we worked out the number of days we had ahead there last week and that type of thing. But he was instrumental too with the map spraying he had to work, and he mapped every paddock there about a year and a half ago. Yeah.
So this thing is going to last. You have the next generation already on board.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's great. It reduces the whole workload. It gives you confidence to have somebody to work along with you there.
So much interest in the farm up to that, but when he loves that end of it, the working out things and maths and all that type of thing. And that's one thing I don't like, but wouldn't be bad at working out things in my head. But
well, I mean, when you can see the performance of the stock there, you're running a good show, you know. Thanks, Alan. That's been a very comprehensive rundown of the history of the farm, how you run it there at the moment. But looking to the future, where do you see the farm moving to in the future? You've obviously made great inroads the last 5 or 6 years with AJ and your son on board now. Where do you see the farm moving to, or where do you see the future for the next couple of years?
Taking advantage of the quality of the grass, improving the soil fertility, cutting down on the costs on fertiliser by just improvement in the management of the grass and all that type of thing, and using your resources which you have, which you slurry out the shed and all that type of thing to its best advantage. And the big thing about it is I could have increased numbers this year, but I was qualified for the beam scheme, a lot of money there to be lost if I did. So I didn't increase numbers. So I'd be increasing numbers because I can carry this a lot more cattle on the farm with the existing, because I'm making surplus silage and all that I don't need, you know.
So the end result is you're keeping more cattle on less land with less inputs, and they're sold up to a month earlier. So there's a fantastic result there, and you're putting a lot of grass through the stock. I think 99% of your cattle qualify for the grass-fed Irish beef standard, which is a great achievement, and you're killing you're killing continental cattle off grass with no meals. And getting very, very good grades. So it's a fantastic achievement, and it leads us in nicely to the next talk from Rory Mannion from Borbia, who's going to outline the grass-fed Irish beef standard. So thanks a million, Alan, for opening the farm to us. Compliment you on the excellent performance on the farm and the great changes you've made for the last couple of years. And on behalf of the Irish Grassland and our viewers, I'd like to wish you all the best for the future. And thank you, Alan.